At the holiday gathering in our sprawling estate, my Tektakun son wrapped me in a warm embrace and murmured, enjoying the $7,500 a month, Mom. My face drained of color as I whispered back, Son, I'm still clocking in at 2 grueling jobs. That was the moment my scheming daughter-in-law nearly inhaled a canapé whole. I'm Marlene, and at 68, I believed I'd weathered every storm life could hurl my way. I was mistaken. Nothing could have braced me for the shattering revelation at my son's lavish winter soiree last December, when my entire existence fractured with a single careless remark. The event was precisely what I'd come to expect from Garrett and his wife. Lila Pulin, icy, and crafted to dazzle strangers I'd never encounter again. Their residence resembled a spread from an architectural digest. All polished granite surfaces and glittering pendant lights that cost more than most people's annual salaries. I lingered near the edge of their cavernous great room, clad in my finest outfit, a deep burgundy dress I'd snagged at a discount outlet 2 seasons prior, feeling utterly eclipsed amid the sea of couture gowns and bespoke tailoring. My arches throbbed relentlessly. I'd just powered through a 10-hour stint as a pharmacy technician at the local drugstore. And before dawn, I'd scrubbed corporate suites in the city's financial district. At my age, juggling dual employment was punishing. Yet it was the sole means to keep the lights on. My pension checks scarcely covered the mortgage on my modest bungalow, let alone groceries, utilities, or the mounting pile of medical bills for my chronic joint pain. Garrett stood across the expanse. Embodying the triumphant software mogul, he'd evolved into towering, self-assured, draped in a suit that likely exceeded my bi-monthly earnings. He chuckled with venture capitalists, swirling a tumbler of rare scotch that probably aged longer than some of the guests' marriages. Pride swelled in my throat despite the undercurrents of estrangement. He'd clawed his way to the pinnacle through sheer grit, and I'd forfeited every comfort to ensure his ascent. Leela glided among the clusters of attendees like a queen surveying her domain. She'd always possessed that striking, aloof riven head, impeccably groomed, radiating the unshakable poise of someone who'd never known the sting of an overdraft fee. Yet her sapphire gaze held a frosty edge whenever it landed on me, a subtle dismissal that shrank me to insignificance. I was extending a trembling hand toward a delicate pastry on the hors d'oeuvre station when Garrett approached. He'd indulged a bit too freely. The rosy tint on his cheeks and his slightly exaggerated swagger gave it away. Mom, he said, slinging an arm around my shoulders in what appeared to be filial warmth, but registered as performative. You're radiant tonight. Truly. Thank you, darling, I managed, forcing a smile to mask the artificiality of his grin. This gathering is magnificent. You and Leela have truly excelled. He inclined his head, but his eyes carried that familiar detachment I'd grown resigned to, as if he were reciting lines from a script titled Devoted Offspring rather than inhabiting the role. I'm thrilled you could join us, he pressed on, his tone shifting to something novel, nonchalant, almost derisive. Savoring that $7,500 monthly allowance, Mom. Really making the most of it, I trust. The words struck like a freight train. My vision blurred. My legs threatened to give way. $7,500? What on earth are you referring to? Dear, I breathed, my voice a fragile thread amid the orchestral hum of conversation. What? $7,500. Garrett's demeanor morphed from breezy assurance to bewilderment. The funds I've been wiring you each month, the $7,500, auto-debited to your account for the last 4 years. I clutched his sleeve, my pulse thundering in my ears. Garrett, I'm employed at 2 places. I mop floors starting at 5 a.m. and ring up prescriptions until 9 p.m. I haven't seen a dime from you. The surrounding merriment amplified, pressing in like a vice. Garrett's complexion blanched to ash. That's inconceivable. I programmed recurring transfers. Leela assisted with the logistics. She assured me you were too dignified to acknowledge it, but required the support. At the invocation of her name, our gazes swiveled toward Leela. She hovered beside the towering evergreen, a skewered prawn poised midway to her lips, but ingestion was the furthest thing from her mind. She was transfixed on us, her expression that of someone confronting a specter. Our stares locked across the festooned space. In that frozen heartbeat, the veil lifted. The culpability, the terror, the frantic recalculations etched on her features unveiled the entire sordid truth. The meticulously applied cosmetics couldn't conceal the pallor creeping beneath. Then, the choking commenced not from the morsel, but from the asphyxiating weight of exposure. The prawn slipped from her manicured fingers as she clawed at her throat, emitting ragged guttural wheezes. Yet I discerned the true source of her agony, dread, raw and unfiltered. Garrett bolted to her aid, thumping her back, inquiring frantically if she required assistance, but Leela's eyes remained riveted on mine. Within them swirled for years of fabrications, for years of pilfered funds, for years of witnessing my degradation while she reveled in opulence, subsidized by what ought to have sustained me. The chamber seemed to whirl in a nauseating vortex. Onlookers began to stir, murmurs rippling outward. Someone suggested summoning paramedics, but my thoughts fixated on the overdue utility notice, the generic medications I'd rationed. The evenings I'd subsisted on plain toast because allocating for both shelter and sustenance was impossible. The funds, I murmured to Garrett as he persisted in aiding his sputtering spouse. Where were they directed? He glanced up, his visage a tapestry of disorientation and encroaching horror. To your account, the one Leela established on your behalf. She claimed its streamlined oversight, that with advancing years you might struggle with fiscal details. Leela had ceased her theatrics, but continued gasping, her gaze locked on me in abject panic. She comprehended my comprehension, and she foresaw the imminent collapse of her meticulously constructed empire. A glacial resolve hardened within my core, not fury, not yet, merely a stark, unyielding clarity of the profound treachery inflicted by those duty-bound to shield me. The festivities persisted in their orbit, yet the landscape had irrevocably altered. The gaiety rang hollow, the illuminations dimmed to a somber glow, and the first grasped that this palatial abode, this extravagant existence, this flawless seasonal spectacle had been erected, at least in part, upon resources intended to spare me from self-destruction at 60. Leela eventually steadied her breathing, smoothing her lavish gown and striving for composure, but her hands quivered uncontrollably, and when her eyes met mine anew, I detected an unprecedented vulnerability. She feared me, and for the first instance in 4 years of toil and surrender, I experienced something beyond fatigue and capitulation. I felt dominion. Amid that sumptuous salon, observing my daughter-in-law's countenance flush with remorse and alarm, my recollections drifted to an era when Garrett depended on me utterly. Memory operates with a peculiar cruelty. In your bleakest hours, it resurrects all you've forfeited. I was 35 when my spouse, Victor, succumbed. A cerebral aneurysm at 30. No forewarning, no grace period for farewell. One instant, he was teasing Garrett's kindergarten antics over oatmeal. The next, he was extinguished, bequeathing me a preschooler and a deluge of hospital invoices that our meager coverage barely dented. Those inaugural months post-Vector were infernal. Garrett would awaken nightly, sobbing for his father, and I'd cradle him in our cramped walk-up, our sorrows intertwining in the darkness. I recall one twilight when he peered up with those soulful hazel orbs identical to the ones now regarding me with such remoteness and inquired when Papa would return. Papa isn't returning, my love, I'd hushed, my tears mingling with his curls. But Mama's here, Mama will eternally be here. And I honored that vow. I was present for every milestone. I juggled 4 positions to sustain us. I sanitized medical offices, pre-sunrise, waited tables, midday, mended garments, post-bedtime, after Garrett, slumbered. My digits were perpetually nicked and inflamed from the sewing needle. My spine protested from the scouring, and I subsisted on perhaps 3 hours of repose nightly. But Garrett remained oblivious to our plight. I ensured that, when he yearned to participate in youth soccer, I liquidated my engagement band to procure cleats and registration. When fresh academic attire was essential, I cycled through the same trio of ensembles for 3 years to afford him parity with peers. When illness struck, I doubled shifts to cover consultations, sans adequate insurance. I recollect the evening Garrett bounded home, ebullient about a museum excursion. The consent form demanded a $40 contribution. I surveyed that document and felt my spirit fracture. I possessed $18 total, with lease renewal looming in 48 hours. That night, post Garrett's slumber, I trudged 8 blocks to the consignment shop and pawned my grandmother's locket, the sole heirloom from my lineage. The proprietor tendered $45 for an item valuing perhaps 20-fold, but I acquiesced without protest. Garrett attended that outing, ignorant of the toll, Secondary education intensified the ordeal. Garrett was prodigious, veritably luminous, yet he pursued honors curricula, mandating costly volumes and laboratory tariffs. He aspired to forensic society, robotics league, mathematics Olympiad. Each pursuit demanded further capital I lacked. Further relinquishments I embraced willingly. I secured predatory loans for a robust laptop upon his coding fascination. I labored Christmas morning and New Year's dawn for premium wages to furnish the graphing calculator for calculus, the microscopy kit for his natal celebration, the apparel to assimilate with affluent classmates. The tertiary phase nearly annihilated me. Garrett secured admission to an elite institution with a merit award. Yet I still remitted $45,000 annually for lodging, meals, and ancillary expenditures. I refinanced our diminutive cottage, the one I'd acquired after interminable leasing, and toiled every viable hour. I aged a decade in those quartet of years, my tresses silvered entirely, rheumatoid arthritis entrenched from the manual exertion. Hypertension manifested from perpetual strain, yet each communication from Garrett detailing his distinctions, placements, aspirations rendered it endurable. He graduated magna cum laude in informatics, and promptly joined a nascent firm that catapulted him to multimillionaire status. I wept at his commencement, not solely for his triumph, but because my epoch of immolation had borne fruit. Yet metamorphosis ensued. Graduation, Garrett relocated cross-continent for employment, and our dialogues dwindled. He cited exigencies, crucial summits, monumental initiatives, schmoozing gull. I rationalized his trajectory, mirrored my aspirations for him. Then Lila materialized. From our inaugural encounter, I sensed her aversion. It wasn't overt. Lila was far too refined for crudeness. It manifested in her appraisal of my threadbare attire, my weathered palms, my humble abode with its antiquated fixtures. She quantified my valuation and deemed me deficient. She commenced subtly dissuading Garrett from abruptly. Each scheduled visitation coincided with a professional crisis or societal commitment Leela prioritized. When I dialed, she intercepted with glacial courtesy, signaling intrusion. Garrett's entrenched in strategy. Marlene, perhaps next fortnight. Incrementally, incoming calls evaporated. Commemorative missives constituted our sole linkage. Garrett dispatched extravagant offerings I couldn't utilize or sustain, like cashmere wraps or gadgets beyond my ken. Yet inquiries into my welfare or necessities ceased. I convinced myself this was organic. Progeny mature, depart, forge kinship. I'd fulfilled my maternal mandate. Now he navigated his odyssey. The solitude was merely the toll of senescence for a matriarch whose offspring had prospered, but ensconced in their manor, appraising the granite expanses and pendant constellations, contrasting their accoutrements against my monthly revenue. A visceral ache gripped me. All those epochs of deprivation, those famished nights to ensure his satiety, those exhaustive shifts for his prospects, none instilled familial stewardship. Leela had persuaded him I was inferior, my tribulations self-inflicted, aid mere philanthropy versus devotion. While I labored dual posts at 68, scouring commodes and enduring 14-hour marathons, they basked in splendor, presuming I thrived on unseen luck. The profoundest wound wasn't the duplicity. It was recognizing the toddler I'd comforted through terrors, the adolescent for whom I'd immolated all, the youth I'd idolized, had transmuted into an individual capable of such utter oblivion. As I observed Lila, laboring for equanimity, evading my scrutiny, an internal pivot occurred. Sorrow and perplexity lingered, but beneath surged something steely and unyielding. For the premier in my existence, I prioritized my welfare over Garrett's. The ensuing days blurred into strained muteness and arduous dialogues. Garrett insisted on escorting me domicile that evening, his pallor ghostly as we idled in his luxury sedan before my quaint duplex. He reiterated contrition, his timbre quavering with disarray, and, I prayed, authentic compunction. "Mom, I vow ignorance," he'd uttered, vice-gripping the wheel until his joints blanched. "I've remitted that sum faithfully, monthly, $7,500 to the account Leela configured." I'd nodded, depleted and sentimentally expended for further discourse. "I trust you, dear, but we must unravel this enigma." 72 hours hence, Garrett telephoned, requesting visitation. His inflection was steely, incensed beyond recent memory. Upon arrival, he appeared insomniac, tousled mane, creased garb, evoking the vulnerable lad who'd seek solace. "We must converse," he declared, descending onto my frayed settee with a voluminous dossier. I've conducted reconnaissance. I brewed us tea in my mismatched porcelain, the remnants, after vending finer wares for vehicular mend. Garrett disseminated the documents across my occasional table, indicating transactional logs and remittance confirmations with unsteady digit. Behold, he intoned, fury restrained. This is the repository I've funded for 4 years. Observe the beneficiary. I peered, straining at the fine print. The ledger bore my nomenclature, Marlene Josephine Harlan, yet the locale deviated. Rather than my duplex on Elm Avenue, it cited an unfamiliar coordinate. That's erroneous, I articulated gradually. I've never encountered this ledger. Garrett's mandible tightened. It's a postal box in the commercial quarter. Lila intercepted all correspondence. She professed aiding your fiscal administration given potential senility. The revelation landed like a cudgel. She implied my cognitive decline. Not verbatim, but Garrett raked his locks. Heavens, Mom, I was gullible. She portrayed it as safeguarding you. She asserted your pride would preclude direct entreaty, thus indirect facilitation was optimal. I scrutinized the statements, numerals dissolving as moisture welled. Month upon month, $7,500 infiltrated this phantom repository. Yet extraction patterns narrated divergence. Funds weren't conserved or prudently allocated. They vanished, frequently within 48 hours of ingress. Her expenditures, I queried, ambivalence curbing curiosity. Garrett produced supplementary folios, charged summaries, invoices amassed from their domicile, wellness retreats, couture acquisitions, escapades to vineyard regions with that elite fitness subscription, private coaching, bi-weekly pedicures, boutique sprees. As he enumerated, a peculiar dissociation enveloped me. While I'd foregone sustenance for anti-inflammatory prescriptions, Leela indulged in $150 while my outerwear endured a decade. She amassed accessory troves. While nocturnal anxieties plagued me, she flourished on my son's benevolence destined for me. Additional findings, Garrett murmured, his cadence precipitating gastric torsion. I uncovered correspondences, Leela and her sibling, acquaintances, boasted. He tendered printed missives, and perusal forged an Arctic nucleus within. Witnessed the simplicity of assuaging Garrett's maternal remorse, one proclaimed. I reference her dire straits, and he eagerly Naturally, I redirect to essential avenues our sustenance. His dam thrives autonomously. She's resilient beyond his estimation. Another exacerbated the fracture. The crone presumes Garrett's indifference. Ideal. Her hubris bars solicitation. Garrett perceives dutiful discharge via I reap rewards sans enduring a parasitic in-law. Yet the most lacerating was penultimate, dispatched 14 days. Garrett persists, advocating maternal inclusion for festivities. Her presence in my sanctuary, critiquing, inducing culpability for our affluence, is intolerable. Perhaps terminate allocations. She's endured thus far sans, evidently superfluous. I deposited the sheaf with quaking grasp. Garrett observed warily, his mien blending wrath, remorse, trepidation. Mom, he softened, my apologies are profound. I reposed absolute faith. I believed I provisioned you. I surveyed my compact parlor furniture, acquired thriftily 2 decades prior, carpeting threadbare, fenestration necessitating substitution I couldn't finance. Then envisioned Lila's citadel, granite vistas, pendant galaxies, chambers dwarfing my abode. Her whereabouts, I queried, at her kin's, departed post, claims reflective hiatus, unresponsive to outreach. I nodded languidly. Predictable flight. She recognized her transgressions and captured. Query, her subsequent maneuver, denial, accusation, or Garrett coercion for absolution. Garrett, I cautioned, comprehend this transcends currency. He furrowed. Elaborate. She pilfered not solely from me. She expropriated for years of your affection, vigilance, solicitude. Presuming aid, you abstained from verification. Calls lapsed as remittances sufficed. She engineered my perceived desertion whilst profiting. Garrett's features collapsed, mirroring the bereft child post-vic. I forsaken you. I permitted her equivalence of funds and fidelity. You were unwitting, I consoled. Yet the burden of those isolated years, those queries of paternal apathy, persisted. I ought to have discerned, Garrett asserted vehemently, frequented, communicated, observed your demise. Whilst my consort luxuriated, silence enveloped us, digesting Leela's perfidy. Ultimately, Garrett resumed. Your directive, Mom. Divorce. Restitution with compounding. Any rectification. I regarded my progeny truly for Ian. Beneath sartorial finery and triumph, remorse devoured, authentic revulsion at his spouse's deeds, yet also a gentleman acclimated to fiscal resolutions equating effective nurture. I require contemplation, I concluded, on equity, desiderata, progression. Garrett assented, consolidating documents. Naturally, deliberate, and Mom, rectification, is pledged. Post-departure, solitary in my parlor, amid deceit's artifacts, I pondered not finances or betrayal. I contemplated autonomy and its unwitting abdication. For the inaugural Ineons, I prioritized self over others' and my desire eclipsed Leela's wildest imaginings. I craved victory. A fortnight post-Garrett's Phantom Ledger expose, I pursued independent inquiry. At 68, computational acumen eluded, but human insight and documentation I mastered. Budgetary scrimping honed, meticulousness, others overlooked. At my dining nook with herbal infusion, encircled by solicited banking parchments, my communicator chimed. Garrett's identifier flashed. Urgency portended discord. Mom, his timbre taut, fatigued. Dialogue imperative. May I approach? Certainly, beloved. Half-hour subsequently, Garrett loomed, haggard, countenance gaunt, attire disheveled, posture defeated, evoking Victor's demise, accompanying an unfamiliar feminine, midlife executive bearing valise. Mom, meet Evelyn Thompson, forensic auditor, retained for profundity into Leela's ledgers. Garrett's delivery monotone, discoveries exacerbate. Evelyn extended firm clasp, empathetic yet professional. Miss Harlan, may we convene? Disclosures are voluminous. Around my petite banquet, Evelyn unfurled capacious binders. Miss Harlan, initial engagement suggested spousal interception for kin. Reality descends further. She arrayed ledgers, credit analyzes, juridical instruments. Your in-law didn't merely divert your son's remit, she orchestrated systemic fiscal domination for eons. Garrett inclined, digits interlocked rigidly. Mom, universal fabrications, residence, conveyances, ethos-soul, underwritten by assertions of familial requisites, inclusive of your purported allocations. Clarify, I uttered, dread coalescing. Evelyn highlighted transactional sequences. Your progeny exhibited extraordinary Ms. Harlan, beyond monthly, $7,500, supplemental for Leela's fabricated maternal exigencies, therapeutic crises, domiciliary restorations, vehicular mishaps, successive urgencies mandating instantaneous succor. Pallor evacuated me. Which restorations? Precisely, Evelyn grimly, quadrennially. Lila alleged $68,000 for sundry fabrications, storm-ravaged, roofing, uninsured operative intervention, collision, incapacitating employment. Garrett's murmur, barely audible. I presumed successive Each maternal concern prompted Leela's narrative of your reticence, mortification. She prohibited visitation amid hardship. Evelyn cited emailed impressions. You allegedly despaired financially, shunned filial witness of strife. I gaped at parchments, assimilating enormity. Lila not only siphoned routine aid but concocted cataclysms, engineered isolation, extracting surplus whilst estranging Garrett. I whispered. Evelyn referenced annotations, encompassing routine and crises, circa $340,000 triennially. The figure levitated oppressively. $340 exceeding my sexennial earnings, capital permitting retirement, serenity, cessation of dual labor when repose was merited. Further, Evelyn intoned, caution, heightened, acquainted with your departed spouse's ancestral acreage. I creased. The rural tract, Victor bequeathed, from patriarch, undeveloped, Boreal, Brook, post-Victor, tax arrears, presumed forfeiture. Garrett and Evelyn interchanged portentous glances. Ms. Harlan, Evelyn delicately, acreage intact. Your in-law remitted duties quadrennially, commissioned topographic and ecological appraisals. Motive, I probed, instinct foreboding. Impending interstate augmentation, traverses precinct. Eminent domain compels acquisition. Valuation $2.10 to $2.9 million. Vertigo assailed. I anchored. Table periphery. Over $2 million. Affirmative. Legally, as Victor's relict, proprietorship yours. Yet Lila maneuvered proprietorship via duty remittance and upkeep. Garrett's pallor, papyrus, quadrennial scheming. Mom, whilst thieving, inducing struggle, distancing Mishi orchestrated legacy appropriation. I reflected on overlooked acreage, guilt for neglect. Victor cherished it, patriarch manually felled, erected vanished lodge, intended visitation for relics, but chronology and treasury she frequented. Evelyn persisted, sustained thoroughfare, eradicated underbrush, foundation reconnoitered, fabricated stewardship chronology, proprietorship usurpation feasible. I queried, absent expedience. Evelyn, adverse possession documentation, astute, prolongation might validate. I reclined, inundated by Leela's Machiavelli. Beyond monetary larceny or relational sabotage, she plotted ancestral ultimate. Evelyn, solicitude amplified. Intelligence indicates Leela probed your coverage, therapeutics, longevity projections. Garrett emitted guttural anguish, inheritance forecasting, precisely. Evelyn tactfully. Implication chill. Lila computed my residual span post-demise claims. I regarded my progeny, triumphant yet duped, whilst his consort annihilated me. His visage contorted grief, fury, self-revolt. Dear, I soothed, not your culpability. Protest incipient. I gestured silence. Your consort, predatory, targeted affluence and altruism, exploited, identified my vulnerabilities, exploited, methodical, patient, cunning, yet discernment, obligatory. Garrett, fractured, frequented, communicated, heeded, correct, I conceded. But her criminality, not yours. Silence digested enormity. Evelyn, Miss Harlan, informational application, evidentiary for penal, restitutional, proprietorship, securitization, your prerogative. I surveyed evidentiary tableau, betrayals compendium, then my progeny, expectant, guilt, deliberation required. I, Evelyn, proprietorship, fortification, instantaneous, executed, post-exit. I traversed my dwelling, no longer mere humility, victimization, testament, each fatigued furnishing, obsolete apparatus, struggles, sigil attested Leela's malevolence, victimhood terminated, autonomy, newfound, utilization intended, 72 hours post-Evelyn's cataclysmic disclosures. Garrett dawned, Mom, Leela resurfaced, covets tripartite conclave, claims explication. At banquet, chilled brew before me, juridical confirmations of Victor's acreage proprietorship, preliminary $2.4 million valuation, venue, I asserts ownership, entitlement, familiar terrain, predictably territorial, yet dominion ceded, concluded, negative, I resolute, Patricia's bureau, council attendant, judicial, not familial. Garrett paused, her displeasure imminent, irrelevant. 120 minutes hence, in Evelyn's symposium chamber, burgundy attire gala, reprise now armament. Garrett flanked, his advocate adjacent, opposite, Leela and her slick counselor, incessantly consulting device. Lila dilapidated ebony tresses, unkempt, concealer failing, ocular shadows, couture draping awkwardly, yet ocular calculation endured. Marlene, she initiated, velvety contrition, appearances deceive, but intent benevolent. Evelyn interjected, Ms. Harlan, discourse archived, consensual. Leela's advocate curt nod. Leela faltered momentarily, persisted, safeguarding Garrett's remorse. Your autonomy predate refusal, consistent, discreet administration preserved dignity. Neutrality maintained, internal ire escalating. Red-handed, narrative manipulation persisted. Duties, Evelyn mildly. Dignity preservation. Lila's facade, familial asset preservation. Garrett Victor's adoptee, post-Marlene inheritance. I'm his son. Garrett adoption legal acreage maternal. Lila pivoted, desperation familiar, darling. Distress comprehensible, but pragmatic futurism. Marlene ages acreage necessitates oversight for state procurement. Oversight you'd tender. Evelyn, compensated substantially. Leela's advocate tactile restraint, disregarded, ensuring Garrett's legacy aptitude. Marlene fiscal complexity unfathomed. Then, internal rupture not rage, crystalline certitude. Leela, I tranquil, authority astounding, attend meticulously. She oriented, uncertainty premier, try daily reflection on your deeds, larceny, fabrications, filial estrangement, lies, legacy theft plotting pause permeated, primarily, your induced quadrennial sentiments, conviction of paternal apathy, transmuting devotion into armament against us. Lila palate, manipulative sincerity, straining. Marlene, unintended, precisely intended, I severed composure and tact. abandonment, oblivion, desired, filial duty sans connection, orchestrated separations serviced you. I erected, Evelyn's instruments grasp, Garrett, rectification, proffered restitution, dissolution, upheaval. Garrett, eager nod, any, mom, monetary rejection, his shock palpable, dissolution, for me, no, life disruption to amend her rupture, no, Leela's glimmer hope, incomplete, alternative rotten, election, Garrett, authentic, defining identity, existence, tabletop acreage documents, imminent opulence, attempted legacy theft values, excess to $2.4 million, fiscal autonomy, guilt superfluous. Garrett confounded, hopeful, need, mom, determine amity via adoration, esteem, or manipulative matrimony, continuance, direct Leela, alabaster, sequence, acreage, liquidation, lifelong comfort, dual employment, cessation, relocation serene for repose, purse, assembled, departure, Leela acquaintances, kin, milieu, informed, voraciously conversational, not campaign, her advocate frantic notation, Leela, penal, civil motive, mute oscillation. Optimal reprisal, non-destruction, thriving, your deeds neutralevant, ultimate Garrett, filial bond, authentic, sans transfers, guilt, gestures, lective maternal filial, Garrett rose, lacrimal, paramount, desire, mom, action known, symposium, egress, buoyancy, Ian, posterior lilas, shrill persuasion entries, mutability, matrimonial preservation, I advanced unretreating, inaugural, adult self-direction sans others crises, liberation incarnate, 24 months hence, I perched on my veranda-encircled cottage in Boone, North Carolina, observing Don Hayes dissipate over Appalachian crests, modest, scale-eyed, internalized, felicity independent, SQ footage at Holy Mine, acreage precedes acquisition, daily, identical locale with infusion, marveling self-determined serenity, state procured $2.6 million, surpassing projections, post-deduction, domicile, pension reservoir, surplus for unimaginable existence, communicator vibrated Garrett missive, biennial rhythm, organic interchange sans prior compulsion, dawn, salutation, mom, meteorological splendor, Clara and I motoring weekend, banquet amenable, Clara, Garrett's paramour, pediatric therapist, esteeming me intrinsically, antithetical Leela cordial versus glacial, authentic versus scheming, initial introduction, vigilance for duplication, instead, attentive auditor, inquisitive vitality, dish assistance innate, response, delighted, signature stew, Garrett's Leela, exodus required 8 months post-symposium, octet therapy, Leela oscillating I abstained, self-centrism, decades, divorce filing call, Garrett drained, yet alleviated, combative universally, mom, manor, vehicles, even acreage portion claim for management, Lila secured statutory minimum Garrett's, authentic holdings half, 0, my larceny nil, acreage, council contended care, recompense, Evelyn eviscerated, ultimate intelligence, Lila, in compact flat, administrative dental, not theatrical descent, mundane reversion she scorned, Garrett sporadic, urban sightings, austere mute, penal abstention honored, veracity dissemination via discrete discourse, inquisitors received facts, truth potent sans orchestration, adjoining, Mrs. Langley, octogenarian widow, emerged gardening, annual camaraderie culinary exchange, cinematic, silent porches, Dawn Marlena hailed, infusion sublime, ideal retort, simplicities, treasure, dual posts, abandoned sale finalization, pharmacy vest surrender, cathartic, janitorial valediction, telephonic retirement, 69, belated golden epicoby, relation versus survival, ceramics embraced, studio sunlit, proficiency, secondary, novelty, progression, creation, joy, primordial, communicator dawn, Evelyn, legal woes absent, chuckled warm, contrarily, Marlene, class settlement versus Leela's concealment firm, modest $18,000, yet preventive protocols, transformation pain to prophylaxis victorious, splendid. Additionally, Evelyn, advocacy, liaison, proliferating spousal elder finance manipulation, narrative sharing, resource crafting, prior, public vulnerability, daunting, now, secure, clarified, opportunity, intrigued, post-call veranda reflection on Odyssey, betrayal, liberating, prodigy rediscovered Unseen wealth, empowered autonomy. Garrett's conveyance arrived. Solo Clara occupational. Easy stride, burden shed. Dawn, mom, adjacent seating. Clara apologetic pediatric urgency, recompense, pledge, unnecessary. I diligence, admirable, companionable quietude. Crest gaze. Garrett, eventual. Pondering Victor. His verdict. Smile. Pride and resolution. Legacy fruition. Earlier Lila penetration. Guilt recurrent. Forgiveness self-directed learned. Victor, benevolent, not omniscient. Deception universal. Resolution, election paramount. Garrett nod, residual weight. Marlene, comprehension vital. Leela non-culpability, yet instructional. Quadrennial severance taught relational choice foundation. Ocular moisture, desire your presence mom, not remorse. Admiration your essence, dialogues, ceramics, camaraderie, deserved existence. And yours, I courageous select veracity over ease, extended quiescence, laws gain calculus, quadrennial absence, substantial larceny, loyalty illusion forfeited, gained fiscal sovereignty, tranquility, profounder bond, solar ascent, contentment novel, not desperate gratitude, earned triumph, 70, secure, elective adore, ceramics, ineptitude, languid infusion, seasonal veranda, septuagenarian lesson, anti-diminishment reprisal, non-punition, irrelevance via superlative existence, precisely enacted.